Hi, my name is Chris. I'm going to be refuting Kimberly's claim that test scores are beneficial in indicating a school's competency. Her secondary claims are that it can help determine whether students need further assistance. The second is that it allows schools to perform at their highest potential. And the third one is that tests include everything that they've learned and skills that they should require, therefore help set standards. I'm going to refute her claim saying that test scores don't entirely reflect the competency of the school. So our first secondary claim was that it could help determine whether students need further assistance. She talked about how a middle school in Atlanta was defined as needs improvement under federal standards. Well, my response to that is that, like, whether the test scores are good or bad, competency tests evaluate their performance on that day and that day only, and they really don't take into account other factors. So there could be examples like some students are smart, but a bad test score in a bad day doesn't really reflect that. So some people could be also anxious and forget everything they learned the day of the test. There's also other reasons, like they were hanging out with their friends, they were watching a game the night before, they were playing video games. So it doesn't mean that they're dumb if they fail the test, it just means they were unfocused and their priorities are wrong. It could also work the other way. Like students that don't know all the material could study all the material the day before a test, and as a result they do good on the test, but they forget everything, and therefore in the long term they forget what they're supposed to be learning. So her second claim was that it allows schools to perform at their highest potential. According to the magazine Endeavors, the No Child Left Behind Act passed in 2002. So therefore the tests were emphasized on math, reading, and science. So as a result, teachers were teaching to the tests, and therefore narrowing their curriculum and cutting back on arts, music, and history. So as a result, students' minds were not at their highest potential, and with teachers narrowing their curriculum, it could be lowering their competency. So that was in contrast to what the advocate said about how an elementary school stating that progress was their main goal and full potential is their main goal. So with teachers narrowing their curriculum, their competency could be lowered and their potential could be lowered. So her third claim was that how tests include everything they learned and the skills they should require to help set standards. She talked about how a high school in Manchester, New Hampshire, talked about how their tests go towards a grade in their class. However, the advocate didn't really state whether they were effective or not. We don't know any results. We don't know if the students improved their test scores or not, and we don't know if students retained their information better. We don't know if they did worse or if they did better, or if they were successful and motivated. And according to the Washington Post, the late Gerald Bracey, he stated that the tests don't measure the skills of creativity, critical thinking, resilience, motivation, persistence, curiosity, endurance, enthusiasm, self-awareness, discipline, leadership, courage, compassion, resourcefulness, sense of wonder, sense of honesty, and integrity. So without these skills, it's really hard to measure the full competency of the student. So with these three responses, it shows that standardized competency tests are just a small part of how competent a school is. To really measure how students are learning, they should observe how older experienced teachers should observe how other teachers are teaching kids and how these kids are learning. They should also observe the kids' behavioral patterns and what they're doing in order to learn effectively, and how their daily test scores are changing as a result of that. Thank you.
Right, the advocate's main secondary claims are pretty clearly labeled. I think the argument that you're making right at the end ought to come earlier in the speech. The argument that you're suggesting is that daily evaluation on test scores that they do in class or on evaluation of assignments is the better measure of all of these kinds of things rather than the competency tests that are being given. I think that's a pretty good point, and I think it would be an easier point to prove that than to simply make challenges on the general competency test. Now, on the general competency test, on the first point, you basically suggest, oh, you know, it's just the one day that they're taking that test, and there could be other factors that are going on. No, that's all true, and maybe they are just cramming, or maybe they are distracted, or maybe they don't know how serious the test is. However, they've been told all those things. They've been told that they're going to use it that way. The fact that they're not responding, and especially when we want to be able to make a comparison between schools, between classes, between states and cities, we need some standard to do that. The fact that somebody's making progress in their classroom and a teacher can see that they're making progress, that's great for that particular classroom, but there are broader issues that have to be addressed. I think that you need to be able to talk about whether or not there's some other way that we can measure those broader issues. On the issue of potential, you know, that whole second argument is, you know, it says that, you know, we're not really looking at their full potential. We're looking at their progress on objective standards. I don't think there's any dispute on that. Is it important to measure those objective standards? And why is it that we have this movement in the first place? Is the desire to have these objective standards misplaced? Have we used the wrong technique for doing it? Is it having a negative consequence? Any of those things, I think, would have enhanced that argument a little bit there. You basically just kind of review what's going on there. And then on that last point, we get this one whole argument that says, oh, we never, you know, tests just don't measure all the things the student does. That, you know, that's true. You know, you never know those kinds of things. But you know what? How else do you measure somebody's accomplishments and abilities and those sorts of things? You have to have some measure of their competence on those issues. And you know, the truth of the matter is that a race doesn't necessarily measure somebody's skill at driving, except the winner of the race is usually somebody that people think of as being skilled at driving. I might be a better driver than what's that guy who was on Dancing with the Stars, who was the Formula One driver? Nobody knows.
He's not Formula One.
No. It was some European guy, and he was famous, and that sounds like it. Probably somebody like that. You know, I could probably drive better than him, but he wins all the races, and so you know he gets all the glory. But I know when to signal. You know, and that's not measured. Well, is that important? You know, you need to talk about why those things are important. When we're talking about spending our money, I think the argument comes down to, are we getting enough bang for our buck? And you need to be able to tell us how we could show that we're getting our return on this without having to have these tests, or that there are better ways to get that result. I think you give some good presses on the argument, but it just seems like it's a little, you know, underdone, underdeveloped. But I thought you had some good challenges on the advocate's claims too.